hammer swung this week. I don't even know how to... All the formats. All the hammers. All the bands.
So obviously there was like oodles of cards banned all over the place, right? Right? But two things. One, this is not just a bunch of stray bullets. This is like the masterwork of like lots of people working in coordination to develop the perfect jewel heist. Like this is a really, really deceptively beautiful mix of bands. But setting that aside, this isn't just a wild update to the band lists. This is also the beginning of a radical experiment with an alternative philosophy around banning cards.
Well, is it because it's so digital first right now? Because there's no paper tournaments going on?
So one of the reasons they listed was the digital first, which I think is a great call to action. I think it's a great reason to finally pull the trigger and do this. Probably the best reason, actually. But like, paper tournaments, they're not happening this year. And I got to be honest with you, it's not looking too good for next year either.
Man.
So given that most of the tournament play is going to be online for a while, embracing the realities of the digital platform are I think it's a really smart move.
Just good business.
Well, and part of it is that, like, part of the reason that don't get me wrong. There's been some different design principles regarding some of the balancing stuff than I think you probably should do. But I think that part of the reason the most recent bunch of sets, it's getting worn out and kind of put into the spotlight some of the problems so quickly is obviously the fact that the stuff in digital, when people play digitally, they play so many more games than they do in paper. And as a result, between that and the information spreading so much faster, formats just age much, much, much faster. You know, like in Eternal, the game, like I lead the design of a digital card game, and the number of games that our players play of every individual, like on a day, in a week, in a format, and part of it is you can just play games faster because it's digital. But when you're designing a game to have to be like played, 500 times in a month, like you can't just let the cards sit there, And I think that some of the stuff going on in Standard wouldn't have been it would be pretty bad, but some of it would be a lot less bad if you weren't playing online. Like, for instance, Cauldron Familiar is a nightmare online. It's not as bad. It's still a kind of a bookkeeping nightmare a little bit in paper, but I think that it's not half as much in paper as it is online. This was
a shocking ban to me. I mean, I play a lot online. I think, like, when you're saying people play a lot of games online, I was just thinking about myself. I mean, like, you grind to Mythic, you play a lot of... Like, I don't care how good you are, right? You play a lot of games to grind to Mythic, right? And so...
Well, that's part of the beauty of it. Yeah.
I mean, like, that's what people say. Unlimited time and a 51% win percentage. You too can be Mythic. So... that's just a shocking ban. I mean, I played against Cauldron Familiar countless times in paper, countless times.
You're probably thinking about balance, aren't you?
Well, I don't know what's bad about it. It didn't hurt anybody.
Yeah, it did. First of all, it does a damage each time. So you can't tell me it didn't hurt anybody. Second of all, if you're asking, like, why is Cauldron Familiar banned? Well, the only way this will make any sense is if we start at the beginning. Growth Spiral and Wilderness Reclamation. We've talked about why both of those cards should be banned so many times.
So, just call a spade a spade. Growth Spiral is, like, by a mile the best card in Standard, right? Like,
no, it hasn't been in Standard for a couple days now, since no waiting time, middle of the tournament. Some people in the SCG had their deck banned in round 4.
So what do you do in that case?
Friend challenge. They do it. It's okay. It worked out. You can friend challenge the rest of the tournament and you play it as it is.
So, okay. But Wilderness Reclamation, people were calling for its ban before its first Pro Tour debut.
Well, I told you, I thought it was going to get banned before it was released. I don't know, man.
It scales in a different way than most other Magic cards. I'll say that.
I don't know. It doesn't. It scales like a lot of cards. It just doubles everything. The problem is that it costs 4 instead of like 7.
Well,
Sword of Feast and Famine costs 5, and you need a creature, and it needs to connect.
Well, I think that, there's a little naivete built into your concept of there only being one Wilderness Reclamation in play. Because in my experience, the first one begets more. Yes.
But yeah, no, I mean, Growth Spiral's the best card. It's been the best card basically ever since Oko was banned. I think Explorer is too good for Standard. I think that Rampant Growth is a pushy card. I think that Explorer is better than Rampant Growth. I think Growth Spiral is better than Explorer. And I think that, like, the amount that... I think Explorer is, like, 3/4 of a mana better than Rampant Growth. And Growth Spiral is, like, half a mana better than Explorer.
I mean, if you look at how much they make you just jump through hoops to get just a regular Rampant Growth in Standard, like, you got to have a dinosaur, you have to have a Wastes in play. Like next year, you got to have a nose ring. They're going to make you do something silly to get a regular Rampant Growth.
Well, it's because it's different. Like, I know that it seems like why wasn't Rampant Growth so busted 20 years ago? Well, first of all, it kind of was. But like Dark Ritual and Lion's Eye Diamond and Mox Diamond and Lotus Petal were even more busted. But second of all, as they scaled the power up, and I wrote an article about this, I'm not going to rehash it, but the point is, as they scaled the power up, jumping ahead in mana gets you more than it used to. Just like how 5s are more better than 4s are than 3s. In terms of how much you get for it, they have to be just for them to be good. If they scaled up evenly, you would just always want the 3s, right?
Yeah,
you always want the 1s is what you would want. The 0s and the 1s.
Ones are the ones who get all the game wins. But I mean, I totally get what you're saying. Let's forget about 20 years ago. 10 years ago, there are a wide variety of decks that played Rampant Growth. Could be some Jund decks, could be some other kind of decks like Jund, but that are basically all Jund. Like progressive advantage on the battlefield. Little attrition, little card advantage stuff. Those decks, if you have a Rampant Growth in your opening hand and you don't have a Rampant Growth in your opening hand, it's like 2 different decks.
Yep. And that's part of the reason why it's so important for them to not put 2 good Rampant Growths in a Standard at the same time very often. Because I think that you want to make it so that people are incented to build their decks in a way in which they can play normal, but they also have good draws. I think that the more you push things in a direction of they just always open up the same, like, for instance, if you can just play, when you play 12 Llanowar Elves or 11 Llanowar Elves, you just always assume you have one, right?
Well, you just mulligan if you don't have one.
Right. Which, that's another thing, by the way. If I can just...
Go for it. This is the ban hammer week. Just swing the hammer at whatever you want.
Can we ban the stupid London mulligan rule? I know that it's hard to imagine, but it has played out literally the exact way that people thought it would. So, it's too... okay, so here's the first part. First, you realize that it gives you too much consistency and it makes formats more boring because they're more repetitive because they always open up the same and yada, yada, yada. We've moved way past that. We're well into the space now of it's just understood that you just respond to all the perverse incentives and that's your life now. Like, for instance, why do people play 31 land in their decks? It's entirely because of the London mulligan. Every deck that uses land, like, set aside stupid like 10 land or 6 land storm decks or something, but like every deck that uses land to cast its spells should just play with like 2 to 4 extra land compared to what you otherwise would. It's really just a function of how much better are your best cards compared to your not as best cards, because you should mulligan so much. And if you just play too much mana, then you'll draw plenty of mana in your mulligan hand and be okay.
Well, those decks also have ways to blunt flood, right? Like they're playing 8 cycling lands or some temples to push some lands away, stuff like that.
Yeah,
also.
but there's always something. You can say that about cantrips, and you can say that about, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be something that lets you do it if your deck's well built, Even if you're playing a mono red deck, you should still do it. I know you can play 19 or 20 land, you can get away with it, and this is only in the case that you think your best cards are better, like meaningfully better than your less best cards. If you think all your cards are pretty close to the same, you should not do it. And in fact, you might want to actually cheat on land a little bit.
19 lands in Modern.
As long as you think all your cards are pretty close, cheat and go the other way. But you should not play a real mana base. One way or the other, you should play too much or too little.
Standard red decks play 22 to 24 red sources now.
Yeah, because they have cards that are better than their less good cards.
It's still weird to me because they have 6 drops and they expect to play multiple 4s in a game, but
yeah, but
22.
You can do anything. Dude, you can do anything you want. You can do anything. It's like Kevin Garnett is the London Mulligan rule all of the time. Anyway, hopefully they get rid of it, man. But who knows?
Like 2007 Kevin Garnett, right?
Yeah, he's like 50, dude. But like,
I'm just checking.
But I do think, it's fine. If you want to make an argument that like, it's good for draft, fine. I still think it makes the games less fun, it's more repetitive. But whatever. It doesn't matter as much. Your best cards are so much better. But at the same time, just getting a playable mix is,
I think it's not just about your best cards being so much better. I think that there are other heuristics that people follow depending on what kind of decks they're playing. Like a Stompy deck shouldn't typically be satisfied with a hand that doesn't have a 1-drop, for example.
Oh, no, that's not what I just mean with regards to playing too much land.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant with regards to
the reason to play too much land.
Mulligan.
No. The reason, the amount that you should cheat up in mana is proportionate to how much better your best cards are than your less good cards. There's also part of the equation that has to do with what is the minimum threshold you need, and part of the equation that is like the risk of ruin. But none of those are even the interesting part because they're all so close to each other in Standard the way it is now. But you know what's not close is cards like Wilderness Reclamation and Growth Spiral. Drawing those are so good.
I don't think there's ever been a fun game that involved Wilderness Reclamation. I might be wrong. But,
I'm sure that it's fun, like, way, way, way back briefly when most people think it sucks. But, finally, they're gone. And so, you have to understand that Wilderness Reclamation and Growth Spiral, it's the best strategy by far, and it's the second and third and fourth best strategy. It's not the only strategies going on that have merit. There's other strategies. A metagame has emerged. But part of the problem is that there will never be enough people playing Growth Spiral and Wilderness Reclamation. And that's part of why it needs to get banned, is because people are not, they want to play stuff that's fun. We're still playing a game here. And some other pillars emerged. And I think it's not unfair to say that, would you guess that some mix of Teferi, Yorion, Cauldron Familiar, and I don't know, is there anything else?
Like in terms of strategies with merit outside of Wilderness?
No, I guess what I mean is individual cards. Cauldron Familiar with Witch's Oven is the thing, right? And Teferi as a card is just the thing. But take for instance, mono red, mono green, mono white. Those are all legit things. They just aren't doing anything busted. Cards, it's not about one card.
Uro or Cultivate into Nissa Who Shakes the World, I think is really impressive. Nissa Who Shakes the World
but both of those are Growth Spiral Wilderness Reclamation decks. you're already doing something there. It doesn't have to be Wilderness Reclamation, but they're already Growth Spiral decks. I'm saying if you set aside all the Growth Spiral decks, the only other decks that have something really... Because, like, take, for instance, Mono White. It's not that they don't have good cards. They do. They have some sweet cards and synergies. But the Mono White deck, it exists within the realities of the metagame in which it was birthed. You know?
Yeah. Like we talked about last week, that's a deck that doesn't get hit by Mystical Dispute and Aether Gust.
Right. Whereas, like, Teferi is an objectively powerful card in Vintage, let alone Standard. And it does work even better in Standard than it does in Vintage.
Teferi took a bigger beating than Wilderness Reclamation this week. Wilderness Reclamation was banned only in Standard and suspended in Historic. Teferi took both of those beatings and was also banned in Brawl. So Teferi was really the loser this week. Or maybe the winner. I don't know how you look the champion of the ban week.
But Teferi clearing out the way is going to I think that's the one. I mean, Wilderness Reclamation, Growth Spiral are the most powerful thing going on. But Teferi is just such a quietly warping card that we've gotten so used to just how many cards are invalidated by the existence of Teferi that we don't always think about it. It only takes a critical mass of people out there still playing Teferi, you know? And if ever there were not enough, people would just add Teferi to their Grixis decks and to their Team of Reclamation decks, you know?
They did both and did absolutely well. Grixis with Teferi did well in the first online Grand Prix, as I recall, and Wilderness Reclamation with Teferi took 2 of the top spots in the Players' Tour last week.
Yep. Which brings us to why is Cauldron Familiar banned?
Yeah.
The reason that Cauldron Familiar is banned, you see, if you ban Wilderness Reclamation and Growth Spiral, they were the strongest things going on, but they weren't the only things. There's going to be this giant vacuum, and what you don't want is to take a 3-strategy format, pull one out, and suddenly it's a 2-strategy format. You got to be so careful about that, you know?
So, tell me about this. In my experience, right, so I play kind of a lot of Standard, right? I played, I don't know how many dozens, hundreds of Standard matches last month. I thought that, like, Pelt Collector, Scavenging Ooze, Questing Beast was a strong number 2 behind, you know, Growth Spiral Wilderness.
In popularity?
Yeah. Like
in popularity, you think that's in popularity the second most popular strategy?
I mean, it depends when you take the snapshot, but I think like for the first half of last month, it was 40% of the matches I was playing. Really high percent.
So the ways you can adapt to a mono green creature deck are numerous.
Oh, I mean, you don't want to play against like Shatter the Sky.
No, I just mean you can make your strategy better against it no matter what your strategy is.
Yeah, I agree.
The number of interesting ways to play against a green deck is enormous. You can not just change it in ways that will give you a winning percentage, or you can, skimp on stuff. The games will be interesting. At the end of the day, Cauldron Familiar has an awful lot of dredge take 263. You can just keep making cards that create inevitability that make it so that you can invalidate the other person's ability to play the game unless they have one of a narrow band of hate cards that makes it so that you don't get to do this to them. But those games wear out their interest. And Cauldron Familiar is not nearly so extreme, but the digital-only world has sped this process up. Additionally, Cauldron Familiar has been super good and popular for the entire time it's been legal. It's just played out. It's boring. It's played a lot already. It's going to be played in more powerful formats, so this isn't the end. If it wasn't banned, it would also be worn out for the entire next year, because you got to remember, unlike Growth Spiral, Cauldron Familiar was not about to rotate. And then Cauldron Familiar, it's like so much better of a thing to do with Witch's Oven that kind of like, and just tons of those things.
Well, than anything else, right? Like those two cards were made for each other.
No, I think Witch's Oven will still get played.
No, I was just following your thought, which is that it's the best thing you can do
yeah.
with Witch's Oven.
By such a mile that it greatly impairs diversity. Without Cauldron Familiar, we're going to see more diversity of Witch's Oven. We're going to also see play patterns that are more diverse than just the same thing over and over again. And also, very importantly, people are going to get to play with cards that are not as unbearable to play with or against online as Cauldron Familiar is. I think they're going to change. I think they're going to tweak a little bit their strategy regarding designing cards. And obviously, they're on like a big leg. They've already made the cards a year from now. But like, I think that they're going to embrace the realities of if you want a game to be fun on Arena, you keep like if you want the cards to be fun in Arena, you can't just have a million triggers. It's just not going to be palatable if you have to pass priority like that, Like you can be used to the heuristics you've developed from Mitgo where you can like be setting stops in all these ways and you're just like, oh yeah, I'm just doing accounting. Who cares? But when you get to playing Arena, you start getting used to a higher quality, a higher standard of life. And Cauldron Familiar, didn't scale up the same way. It's still just as grueling as ever. But the point is, I think that knocking out this part of this, I think is an extension of just this absolutely, and I don't know all the people involved, but I mentioned Eric Lauer because he's talked about it a fair bit, but the idea of knocking off the tops of the pyramid, revealing a wider base. And I think that Wilderness Reclamation, Growth Spiral, those two kind of coupled together were obviously like a disproportionate pillar. And in fact, I would say Growth Spiral is just Growth Spiral and Teferi are just both warping cards, but they're also kind of two of the pillars of the format, even though you can play them together. Cauldron Familiar is just another one of the pillars, and I think that by knocking over all the pillars, it opens up twice as much underneath,
Sure. What's interesting to me, though, is, kind of what we do best, which is what's next for Standard? Like, how do you approach it, given all of these super important cards that are now going to be gone?
Well, okay, so to begin with, Mono Green, I think Mono Green is still super duper legit. Like, it's not just that none of your cards are banned. I think that your fundamental strategy, just on the merits, there's a lot to like there. Yeah. Partly because stuff like Shatter the Sky is harder to justify without stuff like Teferi, But second of all, oh yeah, go ahead.
I mean, part of it for me is if you just made a list of the best cards in Standard that are remaining after the bans, I think cards like Questing Beast would be on that list. I
agree.
I think cards like Nissa Who Shakes the World or Vivian's, probably Nissa in the abstract is stronger than either of the Vivians, but yeah. I think that any of those cards could potentially be on the list. The 5 Casting Cost Vivian's very, very good. And I think that deceptively Stonecoil Serpent is really, really high on the list for me.
I think they're all good. I think that Questing Beast is a pillar of the format. I think that the other ones are like top tier. Like, I think that I would guess Stonecoil Serpent's like a top 10 card, whereas I think Questing Beast might be a top 3 card.
Nissa also, though, right? Don't you think Nissa and Questing Beast really high?
Nissa, she might be top 10. I don't know. It depends on how the rest of the format shakes out. I think you're going to find out that Nissa, there's a lot of things you can do. I think that the format's going to be quite different without the oppressive influence of Teferi Time Raveler.
So I'm just going to rattle off some cards off the top of my head. Tell me which ones are not in the top 10. Bone Crusher Giant.
Not in the top 10.
Not in the top 10. Embercleave.
I haven't seen what the rest of the mix. I would believe that I could imagine it being a top 3, a top 10, or not having enough support. It's definitely got the raw power, but I don't know if it's got the right support.
Lovestruck Beast.
Definitely not top 10. Great card, but not top 10.
All right.
There's just not very many cards in the top 10.
No, there's about 10. Yeah.
Yeah.
Approximately.
Yeah. Dude, what about Mono Black? Mono Black was doing pretty well in the last couple of weeks, sneaking up on people. You don't need Cauldron Familiar either. Then most of the Mono Black decks were not playing Cauldron Familiar. You just play like Beatdown. You play the stuff like the Gutter Bones,
Yeah. And I mean,
And
the 3/1 Knight with Flash,
that guy's great.
the Lightning Helix Knight, that guy, he gets his money every time.
Oh yeah.
Every time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So, I'm not real high on Mono Black because I think
No,
it's a meta deck.
no, dude. I think you're sleeping on it.
Do you want to play Rotting Regis? Speaking of that, do you think?
Yes, I want to play Rotting Regisaur.
Is that a top 10 card?
Yes.
See,
Rotting Regisaur that is a card.
I want to play 4 Rotting Regisaur, 4 Lovestruck Beast, 4 the Great Henge. That's where I want to start. I mean, it's
do that. That's
so easy to go, 2-drop or 3-drop Rotting Regisaur or Lovestruck Beast straight into the Great Henge. You just win the game a huge percentage of the time if you sequence either of those huge guys into the Great Henge. Like any fair matchup, they are way, way behind. You have a card advantage engine and you're racing them automatically. I think that might be the best strategy that I think of coming out of the gate.
That's a good thing to explore out the gate. That's a very believable approach. That could be good.
So how about this? The 2 casting cost, the Lucky Charm thing that doubles all the adventures, is that a top 10 card?
No.
Man, you don't like any of the cards I like.
That's not true. I'm not saying I don't like them. I'm just saying there's only 10
There's
cards
only
in
10
the
cards in
top
the
10.
top 10. Forecasting cost Teferi. How about him?
No.
Elspeth Conquers Death. Come on, that one.
Yes.
Yeah, I figured.
That's at risk of being a top 3 card.
Yeah, so this is my real top 10. Yorion, I think, is still in the top 10.
Easy.
Okay. So,
easy.
So here's my deck. Yorion, Elspeth Conquers Death, a little bit of ramp, some green mid-range cards.
Whoa, you can't just hand wave a little bit of ramp. They just banned Growth Spiral. What do you mean a little bit of ramp?
I was thinking cultivating into 5s. You got all the sweet 5s. Yorion, Elspeth Conquers Death, Nissa, could get a little,
Dude, you're out of your mind.
Slayer? No.
You don't. Why would you want to play all of the sweet 5s?
Because your deck is 80 cards.
Okay, that's touche.
I mean, why choose? 80.
Dude, so
let's go.
You're telling me you don't like the sound of this. Your 1-drops are 4 Knight of the Ebon Legion and 4 Gutter Bones, plus maybe some Duress, depending on how the format breaks. Right? Your 2-drops.
Okay, first of all, nobody's ever beaten a Knight of the Ebon Legion in the history of Magic, so
true.
That guy just always wins. So keep going.
So your 2-drops, you got the Black Lance Paragon. And then whatever mixture you want out of stuff like you can play Kite Sail Freebooter or out of the board. You can play Timurit, though. I think that just sounds good. But also some of your removal is going to cost 2, whether it's Grasp or any of the ones that are just 1 and a B.
I think Timurit's super medium main deck, although I can imagine it being a dominating card in a lot of matchups. It's not aggro enough for me. It's not like Scavenging Ooze gets big while doing its job, Timurit's just there.
Yeah, you need some 2s. I think you just need to have some 2-drops. Maybe you can just go long on Freebooters and just play Freebooters and Paragons.
I'm not into Freebooter. I don't know. It doesn't do enough damage.
Find some other 2. You can play, but just find something else to go along with the Paragon.
What about Stonecoil Serpents at 1 and 2?
Well,
1 and 2 and 6.
Stonecoil Serpent's pretty good. I could be into Stonecoil Serpent. I like it with Demonic Embrace too.
Oh yeah, so, that's insane.
And then your 3s, I like Rotting Regisaur, Spawn of Mayhem, and Demonic Embrace. And obviously, depending on how the format goes, you could play Murderous Rider. I don't know.
In this universe, I would go Murderous Rider. I think that you got to imagine that there's going to be an influx of popularity to questing beasts, and also just big monolithic threats like Planeswalkers.
I don't think there's going to be an influx of Planeswalkers.
Well, I mean, they're going to be more popular than they were.
No, I think they're going to be less popular.
Really?
Personally, yeah.
I mean, I think there's Growth Spiral's gone, but the rest of the ramp packages are still there. Uro is still a top 10 card. Got to be a top 10 card.
Definitely.
Right?
Uro's a top 3 card.
So you got the
we're in the running for it, depending on how
I mean, certainly top 10, but you've got the Arboreal Grazer folks, the Goose folks, Uro, Cultivate. These people are going to want something to get their mana into. Whether it's an Ugin, whether it's, an Elspeth Conquers Death.
I think Ugin's a big winner, by the way. I think Ugin is a real beneficiary of this new way of things breaking. It's kind of it's not obvious on the surface, but I think that this bodes well for Ugin.
So this is just a sideways question, so we can get back to this topic. So I ground to Mythic wasn't too hard last month playing just blue-green ramp, right? Obviously, Growth Spiral gets banned. Do you think a deck like that could just survive, swap out Growth Spiral, put any of the 2-mana accelerating dudes, like the 2/1 hexproof one, or the one that can get +3/+3/+3? I mean, Growth Spiral is obviously stronger than those cards.
Yeah, but there's kind of a faulty premise that that's somehow the good deck. That's not the good deck. Like, the format's evolved past it. That deck was good, debatably a month ago, but like, I think you could try playing it again. I don't think it's just a given that. Like, I don't think it's a given that if you just had Growth Spiral that it would be a good deck.
So that deck is absolutely insane against any like Azorius type sort of Grixis Bant type decks, and I don't know if those decks are losers now with the loss.
They are big losers.
Given that, then maybe a ramp deck is way less good than it was a week ago.
I think so. I think that the banning of Growth Spiral is gonna be a downward trend for ramp. But
all right, back to your deck.
Dude, you don't like 4 Castle Locked Veins and maybe some Mobilized Districts?
I don't like Mobilized District, although I could be convinced.
Dude, Castle Locked Vein is so good in these black aggro
It's very free in those decks. That's one of the things that's so good about it.
Yeah, you might not need Mobilized District as much, but I do like it in small numbers. I just think that having some Mishra's Factory action is like pretty good.
Yeah, but it costs about roughly 100 mana to activate. Like, it's
4?
Well, it's kind of a lot.
It's the same as a Raging Ravine.
It's no Mishra's Fact. Raging Ravine gets a lot more money than that guy.
No, Raging Ravine gets +1 counter each time. This guy gets Vigilance, which isn't as good, no question. But this is an untapped land. I think that you haven't played with Mobilized District enough, man.
What about that night you used to like? That's like the BBB that.
Yeah, the problem is that but Questing Beast makes his life really bad.
Oh, you're right, man. I'm definitely on the Murderous Rider kick. If you think that Questing Beast is going to be so popular, and I certainly do. I mean, you just got to eliminate that guy. I think.
Yeah,
that he's
Grasp is even better at it though.
Sure.
And the problem is your deck's flooded at 3s. You got to balance all these rotting resource, Spawn of Mayhems, and Demonic Embraces.
But the Embrace can hang out. That's the thing. Like that.
Yeah, they can in some numbers. You just can't play like 4 Murderous Riders and 4 of it. You can't play 4 of everything. You gotta cut something.
Can we add some knights and then play like the life draining knight?
The life draining knight?
Yeah, the one that like drains you for B and then it's like a 2/1.
I guess. What, like, do you want to?
I mean, I do want to make Blacklands Paragon better. Right? Like, if the world is changing,
So, dude, what do you think of just playing some kind of a blue-white deck and just sucking it up? Okay. Because here's the tech. Here's the tech. You can play the 4 Maze Mine Tomes that you should have already been playing in every deck anyway. Do you know how good Maze Mine Tome is with Yorion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, you can play Narset. Narset is still just legal. It's restricted in Vintage.
Do you think Narset is a top 3 card? Because that was actually the one I was going to throw up.
Definitely no.
Certainly top 10, right?
No. It might be top 10, but far from certainly in my book. I think
a rock and roller.
He is. Dude, Maze Mine. She is. But Maze Mine Tome, dude. Maze Mine Tome is the truth. Dude, we might get into a spot if you have to play Artifact Destruction to kill other people's Maze Mine Tomes, man.
So, what do you think? Maze Mine Tome. You want to just go straight blue-white? You don't find some attraction to black-white? Given
No, I'm attracted to black-white. You can play black-white instead.
See, I was actually thinking that with Cauldron Familiar in particular being banned, as well as not getting over the top so badly by Wilderness Reclamation, I mean, is it time for Doom Foretold to rise to the top of the metagame? That card seems like it's the new top of the pile to me, right? Like that was like one of the best strategies before a lot of these other things emerged.
I think the Doom Foretold was definitely one of the strategies that existed.
You don't think that it could get much? There was no Bertha Miletus back then. I don't know. That one seems like a goodie to me.
It is. It is. I think you could do it. I think Doom Foretold in black. I think whether you play Doom Foretold or not, I think that there's a lot to like about a black-white Yorion deck.
Like, I think that I would probably play a 60-card Doom Foretold deck and still play Yorion. Right? Like, Yorion is just too good with, like, all those 187 artifacts and stuff like that.
But, dude, I would play more, though. I don't think you want to just stay at 60. I think you want the one out. I think you want the one for free. I think it's just I think it'll be good for you.
Only problem I have with that is like Doom Foretold is pretty clearly center square, and so
no, it's not. You don't have to play Doom Foretold in a Doom Foretold deck.
Well, you have to play Doom Foretold. You don't have to draw Doom Foretold to win.
No, you don't even have to play it. The Doom Foretold part of the Doom Foretold deck, it's just riding the coattails of Yorion. Yorion rewards a whole class of cantrippy type card of enters the battlefield and does a thing and has, that's Yorion stuff.
Is Maze Mind Tome gas with Doom Foretold? I think it's pretty good.
It's fine. It's better with Yorion.
Well, nobody's saying not to play Yorion. I'm saying I was going to play it in a 60-card deck.
I'm saying play it in an 80-card deck so you get one for free and maybe be willing to cut the Doom Foretolds depending on which way it goes. They might be good. It might be good. I would start trying it because it's the bigger win if it turns out to be right. I just think that you're really imagining this is a Doom Foretold deck, and I think that's a real trap because it's not even clear. It's like one of those, maybe you could build it like a Doom Foretold deck and then just cut the Doom Foretolds. Maybe Doom Foretold's what you want. It might be good, but I think you should not lose sight of that you're a Yorion deck. If you want to have a second theme, your theme, like all great themes, is Elspeth Conquers Death.
I was going to say, how many Elspeth Conquers Death do you play if you are relatively creature poor?
4.
Yeah? Because it's so good anyway, right? Anyone, like, just get it with the terror effect or the big permanent destruction effect, and then any payoff, whether it's Yorion or Doom Foretold, after that you already have generated card advantage, right?
Yeah, I mean, your opponent is going to kind of dictate the pace of the game a little bit there. I mean, the fact that you're destroying something and then you have the ability to get back a Planeswalker, obviously it's not as good in black-white as it is in blue-white, but it's still got a lot of merits. It's still got a lot of value there. But also, if you're playing black-white, I think you should be playing stuff like Basilica Bellhaunt.
Oh.
Which is both great to get back with Elspeth Conquers Death, in like lots of ways. Even the making their spells cost more works well with making sure they have a card in their hand to discard. But the Basilica Bellhaunt, I think, has got there's some nice things, some nice spots for that guy right now. And boinking it with Yorion's no joke.
That's a very, very good 4/5 sequence.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I don't think that the problem is Elspeth Conquers Death. I think it's that you should put enough cards in your deck to make sure that you're happy to draw Elspeth Conquers Death.
I think you got to play some Charming Princes in this deck, right? Good with Bellhaunt, better with Yorion.
I definitely don't know that you have to do that. I could believe it, but I wouldn't be so sure. I don't know. It depends. There's a lot of different things to try. That guy's just not at the raw power level like Elspeth Conquers Death and Yorion, where it demands to be played. It's got applications, but it's not a given.
Would you play some Treacherous Blessings in this deck?
I would try it if I were playing black-white. I would definitely try it. And my inclination would be to play it. I like Treacherous Blessing a lot anyway, and I think it's going to age well in the new world. The big wild card for me, though, is if Maze Mind Tome is just enough better that you don't even end up needing the Doom for the Treacherous Blessing.
Oh, that's very powerful. You're right.
But yeah, but it's. I think that if you're playing 80 cards, you can only play 4 Maze Mind Tomes. It's very likely that you just play some Treacherous Blessings anyway, because you'll just have enough ways to blink it or whatever.
So I think your original question was about Azorius without Teferi Time Raveler. I actually think Azorius without Teferi Time Raveler is probably going to be great. I think it's going to be time for the 4-mana Teferi to shine. It's not difficult to get that guy high in loyalty.
Not at all. Yeah, I think I think that if I were going to play blue-white, I don't know that I would end up playing Yorion. I would try it though. I just think that you're going to have to. I think if you're playing blue in your white deck, it's because you believe in Narset and Teferi, Master of Time, which I think is a reasonable thing to believe in. You might believe in Dream Drawer too, but you might also just be kind of scared.
I think that the world changes with Teferi Time Raveler banned. Permission gets much, much stronger.
Definitely, much stronger.
Absorbs are gonna start resolving again, right? The problem
but part of the problem is also that creatures that cost 1 besides the stuff in the Cauldron Cat deck are going to be good again. But they're not just getting invalidated by Growth Spiral.
So I agree with that, but I think like the prospect of absorbing a Questing Beast or a Nissa or something like that just seems extremely attractive to me.
I think Absorb is a big winner. I agree with you. I think Absorb is a big winner. Part of that is also that it's not like Absorb decks want to play against Growth Spiral or Cauldron Familiar.
No, Absorb is bad against both of those cards, right? I mean, the problem with Absorb is like against Growth Spiral, you're like, all right, Growth Spiral, Absorb's too slow for that. And then they're like, 3rd land, 4th land, Teferi, Absorb, Mystical Dispute, right? Like that's what they're looking at. So, it's not going to be like that anymore because there's no Teferi to lead that off. Or there's no Growth Spiral to lead that off either.
Speaking of big losers, though, Mystical Dispute, big loser. Absorb, big winner. Mystical Dispute, loser. Not as big of a loser as Absorb is a winner, but you know what I mean.
I was trying out Mono Blue Beatdown. I don't think there's any incentive to that at all anymore, right? Like every other monocolor aggro deck has got to be better than Mono Blue if the default deck is no longer Wilderness Reclamation.
I think that's probably true. I think Mono Blue is probably 5th place out of the 5 monocolor beatdown decks. Dude, what do you think about playing Cauldron Familiar decks but without Cauldron Familiar?
Like Rakdos or Mono Black? Or
yeah, Rakdos. I think you might have to be Rakdos just to get enough good cards. But maybe you could play Mono Black. I don't know. To me, the regular Mono Black beatdown deck seems like a better way to play Mono Black. But I think you could play a Rakdos Cauldron Familiar, like a Rakdos Witch's Oven deck without actually playing Cauldron Familiar. Like you still get to play.
Claim the Firstborn is still a strong card, right?
Totally. You get Claim the Firstborn, Village Rites. I mean, you have all the sack outlets still, right? All you're really missing is a good thing to sacrifice, but now you have room to put the Whisper or whatever back in, right?
Well, I mean, all the people either had a Croxa or like a Dreadhorde Butcher or, something that they had cut, right? Can uncut those cards now.
Yeah, I don't think it's worse, but also people are going to try hating on you less,
I didn't think there was that much hate for graveyard-based decks in Standard. I mean, like, obviously...
Well, no, the hate... Sorry, what I mean is that people's decks were all... Everybody was only showing up with decks that could, like, actually try to compete with Cauldron Familiar. Like, most people were only playing decks that had a realistic plan against it. I think that going forward, there's going to be a great increase in the number of people who don't have a realistic plan against Witch's Oven.
So the nonsense is going to increase.
Yes, yeah. The nonsense is not going to be tuned it's not going to have immunity. Like we've gotten to a spot where the metagame has a herd immunity to Cauldron Familiar, more or less. But I think that with Cauldron Familiar banned, people are going to go off the deep end again and just start, going to country music concerts and I don't know, hanging out like at school and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah. As we're, but the CEO of Goldman Sachs is going to be DJing to start it off.
Oh my God. So I actually I wanted to ask you, what do you think of Grixis, man?
In Standard?
Yeah. Dude, Nicobolus Dragon God is still illegal.
Do you have that in the top 10?
I don't know. It depends on if Grixis is good or not.
I'm super not into it. I just can't. I mean, I played against like a medium number of Grixis decks over the course of like the last month, and like obviously 50% of the matches I played more or less were playing Growth Spiral, and then 50% of the matches I was playing Questing Beast more or less. And it didn't seem to me like either deck was really that bothered by Grixis.
Wait a second. Wait. You think that now that Cauldron Familiar, Growth Spyro, and Teferi are all gone, that you can't build a Grixis deck that's just going to maul these questing beast decks?
I think the questing beast decks in the new world are going to come packing with their new buddy, the Great Henge and Vivian 5 and Nissa Who Shakes the World, and they're not just going to be some creature deck that you can push down the stairs with removal.
Okay,
that's what
if that's true, if that's really the way the green decks go, that's not a good sign for Grixis. But I will say that Nico Bolas is a great way to go over the top of Nissa and Vivian. I do think that if the right way to play green is the Great Henge, and green is one of the best decks, I'm probably not going to play Grixis. I do think the Great Henge is a real problem.
Like, I think to me, all roads lead to the Great Henge. Like, Rotting Register, Great Henge. Lovestruck Beast, Great Henge. Questing Beast, Great Henge. Nissa Who Shakes the World, Great Henge. Like, all of those things just, like, slide together in like, multicolor decks, mono green decks. It just seems like it makes sense. The Great Henge is such a great solution to other monocolor aggro decks. That's the thing.
Dude, what about Sorcerer's Spyglass, man? Yeah?
Gem Razor, man. It's already there.
Yeah, never mind. Playing sucks. Anyway, dude, I don't even think Sorcerer's Spyglass works at all anyway. But dude, Bolas' Citadel for your Witch's Oven deck?
I'm into it. I think Bolas' Citadel is one of the most underplayed cards in Standard. That card is absolutely busted, and I think that the fact that people didn't realize how busted it was is only because Wilderness Reclamation was more busted. Like, Bolas' Citadel is insane. I don't know how else to explain it.
It's very, very good. Totally. What do you think of Mono Red in the near future, man?
Super medium. Like, I don't know, like, is 48th percentile medium? Like,
yeah.
That's where I have it. Like, not 51st percentile.
It's like super medium if it's in the 48th percentile.
Like, it's very, very medium. Like,
aggressively medium.
Like, the idea of playing, like, a Tin Street Dodger instead of a Pelt Collector, or, like, my big plan is, like, my 2/2 lives, right? Like, if my 2/2 lives, I'm totally attacking you for 3 next turn.
Hold on. I think that, let's be fair. If you're playing red, it's because you believe in Embercleave.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
I hope so. What about Uro, man? What's the new Uro deck look like?
I think I was actually thinking a crazy thought, which is that we might see some wackadoodle Bolas' Citadel decks that are driven to 6 with Uro, and Uro keeps coming after the Citadel is in play. That's actually where I think it's going to go. Like, aggressive ramp. The kind of Arboreal Grazer type ramp. Like, you defend your early life total, you get to 3, you get to 6. Rock and roll.
Is there any chance we can mix this with, like, Peer into the Abyss and the Tutelage, Teferi's Tutelage? You know, that combo where, you win, basically, right? Like, you get the 3-mana enchantment. And you can still play Scheming Symmetry, or you can play some of the tutors, right? Like this Grim Tutor, I don't know.
Scheming Symmetry is super good in this strategy.
Yeah, I don't know how many tutors you end up playing. I think you should play a bunch, because I just think that it's possible you don't have to play very much of the Tutelage Peer into the Abyss stuff. You can play some of it, but I think as part of your ramp package, it's such a profound added dimension to go over the top. You can still focus on your Uro, Bolas, Citadel stuff if you want, whatever you're into. But I just think that combo is going to have a new lease on life, unless the format shifts into tons of counterspells.
What do you know?
It used to be a worse something else. You know, that combo used to just be less good than Wilderness Reclamation for doing that sort of a thing. And now there's not Wilderness Reclamation.
What do you think about just Underworld Dreams?
I think you should play one. I think Sphinx it depends on, I think the Tutelage is like better, but I can imagine you playing like one Underworld Dreams for Tutelage. I do think that if you're going to play a third color, Underworld Dreams gets a little bit harder to do. And then the Tutelage obviously just synergizes pretty sweet with some other stuff, you know, like the symmetry. But I think Underworld Dreams is dope. And I think that they're, I personally, full disclosure, I'm a sucker for Mono Black Control. But that said, I'm going to try Mono Black Control with Peer into the Abyss and Underworld Dreams in a Black Devotion deck, man.
Wow, Black Devotion. Are you always been a sucker for Mono Black Control?
Always. I played Necropotent. I crushed it with Necropotence back at that. Do you remember the regionals where every single card that was ever good in a black deck was gone?
Yeah, you snake basketed. This was during a period where they were they were trying the regionals 1997.
Oh yeah,
Worth Walpert won the regionals. You had a snake basket deck,
dude. So they wanted
I know which regionals.
Dude, they wanted Necropotence. God bless Worth Walpert and his elementals, but they wanted to play. They wanted Necropotence. He had a
Disintegrate. There was a Disintegrate in his deck.
Dude, they reprinted Necropotence with the philosophy of we'll just balance the entire color around it. So they just rotated out all the good cards. And so I just played a Necropotence deck that was nothing but B-roll guys. Nothing but B-sides. My deck, it was just okay, I've got Serrated Arrows and Snake Basket and Black Knight and
was Isan Shade legal?
Isan Shade or
Isan Shade is my man.
Dark Banishings, Soul Burn. Who knows?
Who was that top 8? It was
whatever garbage you could play.
You, Eric Lauer, Dave Price, Worth Walpert, all in that top 8, right?
With the possible exception of me.
I
don't remember. Did I lose in the first round of top 8?
I don't know.
Somebody smashed me.
Dave beat Eric in the round of 8, and he had a Force of Nature in his sideboard, and he defeated Eric with the Force of Nature.
Dude, that was actually that tournament was the day I met Eric Lauer. It was amazing. It was also the day that Eric Lauer and I became instant friends, and part of it was that even though I was just some punk kid, I could tell that Eric had a profound love for me from the moment I was playing that Necro deck. There was nothing but bad Necro cards other than it had Dark Rituals, right? And he's playing a blue-white control deck that was super
Cantrip Counterpost. He had a bazillion balls.
Outposts and Thawing Glaciers and Brainstorms and
I want to say his deck had 17 land, I think.
His deck was so dope. I don't know. He might have more than that.
Lodestone Bobble Ban gets the
but he
lands
also
you
had
sacrifice back.
Yeah, but he had Outposts. I think he had more than that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that Eric loves Necropotence more than life itself. There's nobody who loves Necropotence as much as Eric Lauer loves Necropotence to do it himself, not for the world, But when I sat down and played him, and I just put out Necropotence. I just play I just Dark Ritual Necropotence, he Force of Wills, and I just play another Necropotence, and I just start necroing against his blue-white deck. It was just he could not. It was so amazing because it was like when I asked Wafo Tapa what he was playing at this extended Pro Tour or modern or something extended Pro Tour, and he sheepishly he's embarrassed. He turns red and shows me his Hypergenesis deck. He was so jealous that I built some 4-color control deck that I went 5-1 with in the standard portion or in the modern portion, but he couldn't find a control deck for that format. Well, for this, Lauer, he couldn't find a Necropotence deck. He didn't think it was possible, and after that, he vowed to never doubt Necropotence again. And I could tell this was a man of discriminating tastes.
That's a beautiful story, man. Beautiful story. Speaking of overpowered black cards, we only talked about standard. Do you want to let's whip through the Pioneer bans real quick?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so Pioneer, Inverter, Truth combo we talked about. Kethis, the Hidden Hand combo we've talked about a number of times. Walking Ballista is an extension of the Heliod combo. And Underworld Breach we've talked about. Basically, the Pioneer thing here isn't about balance insofar as absolute win rate. It's about recalibrating their accepted levels of combo decks because they can see that the more that people play these combo decks, when they become too prevalent and warping of the format, people just don't want to play in the tournaments as much. And that's what they were seeing. And I think this is a nod towards a recalibration of Pioneer with regards to how much do we want Pioneer to actually be a combo format when there aren't things like Force of Will. There's like Thoughtseize, end, right?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's important to note about Pioneer is that, which is a little bit different from some other formats, is that when you have so many different viable combo decks, even if you're just talking about like Inverter and Underworld Breach, right? Which were the two prevalent combo decks when we played in the Players Tour in Phoenix a few months ago, right? Versus adding Walking Ballista and Kethis and so forth. And then you don't have that many, there's no Force Will at all, right? Is that like, it's very, very difficult for anybody to prepare for that many different combo decks. Like, the cards that are good at fighting the Inverter combo are different than the cards that are good at fighting the Underworld Breach combo. And like, you just don't have room. And I think that if you can't solve
and not enough of your opponents are playing the one.
Yeah.
Like you build a deck that's super good against Inverter, and then you play against it 3 times out of 12 or whatever.
Yeah. Then you just got to play a red deck. It's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, I bet. You can still play a lot, most of this stuff, other than Underworld Breach, forget that card. But you can still play most of this stuff in the next format up, And that's part of what I like about this new philosophy is that if you're going to have like a million formats, like Pioneer and Historic and Legacy and Brawl and Standard, and, if you're going to have a million formats, then you don't have to worry as much, because one of the upsides you get is that your cards are still legal somewhere.
Where's Oko legal?
Combo.
Is he legal in Legacy?
Oko. You can play Oko in Legacy for now, not that much longer. But but you know what's messed up? Oko in Vintage, man. That guy is so sick. That's where he's going to end up being his home. He's going to get banned everywhere else. In Historic, Wilderness Reclamation and Teferi have both been suspended. Not surprising.
That's just a ban now, right? Like,
sort of. They just don't give you a refund yet. Basically,
got it.
Well, but part of it is that they have walked back half the suspensions. You see, if they suspend it and then later decide that they didn't need to after 3 months, which is also kind of the normal, but it's weird to give everybody a refund and then allow the card again. You know what I mean? So like,
just buy it back, right?
Well, they still have it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think I've ever noticed when I get a refund.
And then Brawl, Teferi being banned makes sense, obviously. Brawl is supposed to be a fun format. Teferi is not actually that fun. It gets old. I for one, welcome our new R&D overlords and their aggressive use of the banhammer.
Quick prediction. We'll know the answer a little bit to this by next week. What do you think's coming out of the gate? Who's the best deck in Standard?
I think it's going to change from week to week for the first 3 weeks.
Who do you think for this week?
For this week? Like this upcoming weekend? Like, my head says mono green, but honestly, no, that's not true. My head says Yorion.
Yeah?
Yeah. But my heart says mono black. Aggro.
Let's see who's right. My head says Teamer Adventures.
What?
Teamer Adventures.
Wow. Okay, tell you what. Let's set aside all the other ones and only talk about our crazy predictions. How about I get mono black aggro and you get Teamer Adventure straight up, and if it's anything else, it's a push.
Okay. In.
Love it. Okay. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, so jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive. To gain, to love, and kept me alive. Visions of better weather, light inside. See through the mirage, gotta survive. Dreaming, someday I find a way. Gotta repay the game.